Welcome to everybody. It's very good to have you all here for our 15th North American Miro user group event. We call them VMUGs for short. And this is a super important event. We're straying again from our typical format where we'd have some speakers come in, give a presentation, and highlight how they've been using Miro. Interestingly, while most of our speakers are Miro users or former Miro employees, as it were, we wanted to talk a bit tonight about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And so we're really excited to have that discussion and have our great speakers, Maura, Brittni, and Melissa with us. So I'm one of your hosts tonight. I'm John White. I'm a consultant from Calgary, Alberta, and Miro is the sailboat that I love to sail in. That's wrong. I read that wrong. It's the sail of my love boat. That's what I meant to say. It's something that I'm using almost every day in my work, and I absolutely love it. My company, Improved Consulting Group, has been using it for about over 3 years now, and we use it to help companies develop some skills in visual collaboration and in continuous improvement so they can use Miro as a mechanism to improve their business all the time. It's pretty cool. But the biggest thing I love about it is getting people to collaborate together. That's where it really brings the power. And today I have with me as a co-host, Annie McLeod. Hey, Annie.
Hey, John. Thank you. I'm Annie McLeod. I'm a project management consultant and one of the founders of the Project Management Game Board. And I'm in beautiful downtown Kelowna, British Columbia in the Okanagan Valley. And we found Miro, I guess, almost 4 years ago, and we're lucky enough to be introduced to the marvelous Brittni, who got us involved in the community. That Jonathan and I were there in San Francisco for the first VMUG. And with the Project Management Game Board, the work that we do is we've selected Miro as the backbone for everything we do in training people in project management and really leveraging the whole power of collaboration. So we'll go through a couple of house rules before we get started. Please make sure you mute your mic during the presentation. We're going to have brief introductions from our panelists. And with those 3 speakers, we've got some questions that they're going to be addressing as we get into the Q&A, and as well as leaving it open for folks to ask their own questions. So until we get to that section, you can either put those questions in the Zoom chat or on the board, or we'll go from there. And I think that's what we've got for now, John.
I think that's right. So just before we get into introducing our speakers and letting the most important people in the room here talk for a little bit, we were doing our research and getting prepped for this event, and we found a quote that we really like. So I just wanted to read that for the crowd. It's that diversity, or the state of being different, isn't the same as inclusion. One's a description of what is, while the other describes a style of interaction essential for effective teams and organizations. That really hit home with me. That really resonated. So I like that kind of guided how we prepared for this event. We always love to hear from Miro's community events coordinator, who's responsible for having all these lovely events be supported by Miro. So Natalie Lorino is in our crowd tonight. Hello, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. As John mentioned, I'm the community coordinator here at Miro, and I'm looking forward to this event. And I just wanted to thank all of you for taking time out of your Wednesday to share with us and learn about a really important topic.
Great. Thank you for being here. You want to take us through our agenda for today, Annie?
Yeah, sure. So it's a very brief agenda. As I said, we've done the welcome. I'm going to take people briefly through some Miro pro tips. We have an icebreaker there. It's a question that we'd like people to get some of their feedback on. We're going to introduce our speaker panel and do question and answer piece, and then we'll do a retrospective and finally sign off. And then we also want to take people through the pro tips. Thanks, John.
No problem.
So basically, we've got kind of key things that for those that haven't used Miro a lot. The first thing that we highly, highly recommend, that's why we've put the crown on it, is the undo. So key to collaboration is not only being able to do stuff together, but being able to undo what you just did. So it's Command Z or Control Z, gets used by even the most experienced Miro users. With Zoom, there's quite a number of ways that you can zoom in and zoom out. Having a mouse is pretty critical when you're using Miro boards, and that mouse wheel on your mouse, zooming in and zooming out, it's as simple as rolling that trackball. On a touchscreen, you pinch with 2 fingers. You've got your plus and minus. So in the bottom right corner, you can see from the picture there, you'll have a fold out that will have the positives and negatives to scroll in and out and roll through those. Key thing too to remember is you should be using Chrome or the Miro app to get the most of the experience, and especially so that you can interact with the board. Those are the 2 best ways to do it. Duplicate is Control D or Command D. Selecting is going to hold the Shift key and then click on the item to select it. And then you would double click it to add text. And then finally, you'll see in your left hand toolbar, you've got a at the very top, there's a blue arrow. When that arrow is blue, that means that you're on a pointer, so you can select and move around the board. And if it's black, then that means you're on the pan. So it looks like a hand, and then you can move around the board without actually disturbing anything on it. So those are our key shortcuts for today.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask us in the Zoom chat. We'll be in there right away. Let's have a look at this icebreaker that we've selected for today. So it's from Talent Map, and they had 5 questions that everyone should be asking about diversity, inclusion in the workplace. And so we thought we'd throw them up here. I'll make sure everyone is pulled to me on the Miro board. And I'm just going to paste the link for the Miro board in the Zoom one more time. I know we've had someone just arrive, so hello to Claire. So come on into the Miro board, grab one of these dots and drag it into the square that best represents your response for these questions. And you can see up top, we've got our little emojis to guide your feelings. Well, not to guide your feelings, but to help you represent them with the dot.
Should we set our timer, John, for a minute?
Sure. Let's give everybody 1 minute to do this. Oh, yes. And I'm going to pick some music. Let's do some smooth groove. Yeah. So it looks like relatively so. A majority of people feel accepted, but there's some on the lower end of that scale. Diverse identities, ideas, and ways of thinking and working are, for the most part, valued in the organization. A lot of neutral responses here. So I'd say that's a soft support for that one. Where things kind of don't look as good as, does your organization's workforce reflect the diversity in the community? That's a really interesting one. Does your organization have a clear definition of what is considered a respectful workplace? We had a lot of people jumping into the top end, but we see a fairly wide distribution of responses across that. So some mixed feelings there. And does your workplace feel respectful? And thankfully, a majority of responses are in the top 2. So that is really good. So very interesting. We're coming from different backgrounds and areas, and already we're seeing the diversity in our responses so far. So it looks like we'll be able to add some value via this discussion that we're going to have today to hopefully give people some direction and some tips. So as we get ready to move forward, I don't know about all of you, but since the pandemic started, I don't know, I've been watching more news and absorbing more news, social media, newscasts, all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to go by a day without hearing about groups of individuals who are not being treated fairly due to racial, religious, or other ideological reasons. And when steps are taken to right these wrongs, then there's outcry from the other side who feels that they shouldn't have to change to accommodate another group. And as someone like me who tries to treat people really fairly, and acknowledge my own biases, or unconscious as they might be, I find it really frustrating at times that more people aren't having good open conversations about things. And so when it feels like that for me, I think the way around it is to start having uncomfortable conversations. And today I think we're gonna, I don't know if it'll be uncomfortable for folks or not, but I think we have three amazing women who have tons to say about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And I'm ready to hear their stories. I hope you are too. So let's all welcome Melissa and Brittni and Maura. Hello to you all. And I'd like to give each of you a couple of minutes to introduce yourself. And from the panel I have up on the screen, we can go left to right. So Melissa, hello.
Well, hello there. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here on Wednesday night. My name is Melissa Jackson. I am currently an independent consultant, but more recently, I was a program manager and the co-chair of diversity and inclusion at Samsung Next. And in that role, I focused specifically on thinking about how our product group could become a more inclusive product group. And so it went in a variety of different directions in terms of what we were able to accomplish. And so I also bring that up to say, I know during today's conversation, we're going to be specifically talking about it in the workplace, but I always start these conversations really emphasizing this idea that these things start at home. So really excited and really happy that you guys are taking time after work hours. I know where I'm at, it's 7 o'clock. I am currently based in Atlanta, Georgia, here in the States. So I don't know where you guys are calling in from, but kudos to you all for being here. And Brittni.
Yeah.
I'll hand it over.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Brittni Cocchiara. I am the Senior Community Marketing Manager at Webflow, formerly at Miro. So this is really exciting to kind of be back. It feels almost like home. I currently build communities, and while building communities is it's still new a little bit for me, diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been like at the forefront of everything that I try to do. And now even building communities, like how do we make our communities diverse, equitable, inclusive? And so I'm extremely, extremely passionate about it, even to a point where if the company I'm working with, it's not important, I make it important. So I, again, want to kind of mirror what Melissa said. Thank you for joining us now. It starts at home. Thank you for being willing to have maybe an uncomfortable conversation, to ask that question that you weren't necessarily comfortable asking. Like, I definitely appreciate it. And I'm excited to be on this panel. So thank you.
Nice. And on to Maura.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am an intern program supervisor at a private nonprofit, in addition to working currently as an independent contractor as an equity and inclusion consultant. So my experience has been with not only tech companies, but nonprofit folks who are interested in building anti-racist workspaces, but really don't have the language or the tools to begin the work. This has been my passion and my life's work for the last 10 years. So it pretty much is embedded in all of the work that I try to do. I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to learning from all of you and talking a little bit more about what all of us can do to move this work forward. So thanks for joining us.
Nice. So as most of you, I believe all of you, went through the registration process for this, we had one question on the end of the form, just saying if you had a story to share, something you wanted to say, or questions that you wanted to ask, please let us know. And it turns out that quite a few people had some questions that they would like answered to pose to our panel. So the way we thought would be a good way to proceed would be one by one. We'll get through these questions. We'll ask the panel. The panel, you should feel free to jump in if you have a response, and we'll share the airtime. We'll keep responses around, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I'll start a timer for 5 minutes, and if it goes on for much longer than that, we'll we'll slowly wind down so we can move on to the next. And for those of you here in this event live now, we have little spots below. If anything that the speaker said in their intro or during the conversation that's about to happen tweaks your interest, then you can ask them specific questions down there. And we'll put some blank sticky notes down in their particular profile question areas. So feel free to ask questions there or drag a new question up into this orange section. You all have the capability to do that. So Annie, do you want to get us rocking with question number 1, please? And unmute yourself so we can hear it.
Favorite phrase.
Yep.
So the first question we've got is, what strategies do you know of for making inclusion happen when there isn't leadership from the top about its importance?
I don't want to put her on
Brittni?
the spot. I wonder
Yeah, I
if
was going to
Brittni-
say,
yeah.
Brittni, you kind of alluded to that. So
Well, I have been in this situation plenty of times. I'm sure we've all, the panelists, I'm sure we've all been in that place. How I honestly feel is it's difficult to make it important from the leadership. It just is. Like, there's no way around it. But you have the power to make it happen from the bottom. Like, you have the power to speak up, to, I know in my case, like, create programs, to put myself out there, to show, you know, I'm doing community. It's like, let's show how our community outside of the company is diverse, is inclusive. And hopefully that bubbles up to the top and you show the top how important it is to be diverse, to be inclusive, to be equitable. But, you know, also make sure that you're doing this work and you're doing it well and that you're getting rewarded and paid to do this work. I feel like sometimes in companies you are doing a lot of this work and you can, you know, be almost taken advantage for doing it. And so, you know, have those difficult conversations with the leadership and the top. And if you find that it's still not important and you're still not making the move, get out of there. That's probably not where you need to be. That's my honest opinion. So, yeah.
anyone else, Maura or Melissa?
Yeah, I mean, I would second that. I would also say, hopefully you're not the only person in your organization who recognizes and feels this is important. And if you aren't, you know, one approach that I use was to democratize the kind of solution or the approach to at least what the top problem that the organization was facing as it related to diversity and inclusion. So in our case, it was around hiring, which is very standard, typical for a lot of organizations, right? They have this conversation around, we don't have a pipeline. And there were plenty of people in the organization who were like, that's, you know, that's nonsense. And so we were able to come together, create a caucus essentially, and say, like, this is where there's something wrong. Your organization usually has some type of employee engagement survey or some type of anonymous profile to allow you to have those conversations with leadership. So you should use that. And then to Brittni's point, if, you know, there's no response, it may be time to reconsider where you're at.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. As just maybe a little question, is there some people won't take action based on, you know, an obvious need, sorry, but they might need to see evidence. Is there evidence out there that can be shared on how effective addressing these concerns can be? Does it, you know, is there anything you can refer to help have the conversations?
So I have a few books that I was going to talk about at the end, but I can definitely bring them up now. I'm always a proponent of, you know, whatever medium you feel comfortable or your leadership feels comfortable or they're more receptive to, use that. So one thing that I used in certain trainings were podcasts, because that's like my go-to. I'm a podcast fanatic. books are often recommended or they're asked for. And so there's a woman by the name of, what's her name? Mary Frances Winters. She's got a few books, and one of them is We Can't Talk About That at Work. And so, I would say if it's not her, then finding a thought leader in that particular, in this particular space to kind of like lean in and to give specific numbers and strategies. Harvard Business Review, right? Like I've often pulled, concrete hard facts around diversity, inclusion, and why it works in the workplace. I found that's usually what works. Now, if you can't get past that, then it may be something that you may not be able to solve at that particular organization, and it's okay, right? It's still something that we're all trying to solve for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good job, Annie, grabbing that snapshot of that book too.
Okay.
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Unless Maura, do you have anything you would like to add around that one, or you ready for the next one?
I'm ready for the next one. I thought
Okay.
both of you echoed everything I was already thinking. So
An aligned panel, love it. What are some strategies to build diverse customer groups?
I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about that question. Diverse customer group. So not every organization has access to it, but if your organization is large enough to have a research team, definitely utilize them to do demographic studies of the users that you currently have and just understanding like where you're at. I'm a big proponent of, just making sure that we have very iterative and reflective, that we're not just taking a cookie cutter like, hey, Google and Amazon are doing this, we should be doing that. You really need to take a look at the hard evidence that your organization, what you're delving into. Our research team, for example, was able to do a user demographic study. Long story short, turned out that most of our users tended to be wealthier, white women who lived in the center of the United States, right? And the reason why that becomes a challenge or it becomes a problem is when we were thinking about, in our case, we were working on like fitness and wellness apps. When you're thinking about the types of people who are using this app, if you're only targeting that demographic, there's no opportunity for it to really expand. As human beings, oftentimes I don't want to say as human beings, but in the United States, we're often socialized. And I'm not sure if that same thing is reflected in Canada. But, we tend to be socialized in groups that look like us. And so when we're thinking about word of mouth and getting the product to propagate across the United States, we have a barrier there. So I was able to pull that out specifically and say like, hey, we should consider getting into other avenues or dipping into other opportunities in the health and wellness space. So content creators, we made sure that we tapped into Black and Latino content creators. That was a big effort on our end because our content creators pull in users, right? And so that was what we did. And so I'm hopeful that you guys are even able to look at your users, even anecdotally, even if you don't have the large research team to do an in-depth analysis, you can do something a little bit more simple.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I absolutely agree with that, everything that you said. I think in the case where like I'm building communities and, we see the demographics and it's like white male, mid-30s in the US. And it's like, well, we know we have a diverse customer base. We know that they exist, but why aren't they connecting with the community? Why aren't they, at the events in our forums? And we took we did a look-see and we're like, oh, they're only seeing white guy, middle-aged white guy in the US. That's all they see. So you have to kind of change the way that you market to make it, to help these people see that they are a part of the community, that they are there. So yeah, highlighting, underrepresented groups is super important. They have to see themselves there. And if you're not giving them an opportunity to see themselves, then you're going to run into the same problem.
That's such an interesting point. The way to frame that is if you know your key demographic, then you'll probably do everything you can to sell to that key demographic. But instead, why not ask the question, how do we diversify? And you're not diversifying to lose your target demographic. You're doing it to build additional customer base. So that's such an interesting thought about building communities, and really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Any other comments on that one?
Yeah, and keep in mind that, white men aren't the only ones who have community, right? So, and I'm going to dig into the fitness space because that's what I'm last worked on. One of the points that I brought up to them is like any type of fitness activity that you can think of, there's usually a community around it for Black women or Black men. So for example, I'm a part of one that's Black women bike, Black girls run. There are a lot of kind of specific affinity groups that exist. And so I encourage you to, look out for them. In my case, I might look out for, I'm like, okay, well, where are all the Latina women who work out? Latina women in fitness. There are plenty of Latina publications and articles out there for you to like lean into. And so definitely be mindful of that.
Mm. Very good. Okay. Annie's doing an awesome job of getting some notes here, and we've got a spot off to the side for our asked and answered questions to get them away from the clutter. Aren't we good little Miro users? Okay, next question. It's just a layering thing. I'll jump into the next one, and I'll also take the notes on this one, Annie, so you can take a little break from that.
Okay.
Do you feel that social justice warriors or cancel culture have a negative or positive impact on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I can start with this question. I feel like cancel culture to me it makes it harder for us to have these uncomfortable conversations to begin with, right? Because the point is not to shame folks who don't know what they don't know, right? Because everybody is not well versed in this space, and there is space for all of us to learn and unlearn. And what I try to impart not only within my workspace when we're talking about training and education around anti-racism is like there has to be a space created where you feel comfortable making a mistake, and that we're using that as teachable moments versus using those moments to condemn you. And I think that is what makes implementing DEI incentives, no matter what organization is focused on this, is because there is a fear that if I say something wrong, now, I'm going to make an uncomfortable work environment, or I'm not going to be able to move past this with my colleague, where we have to create spaces where there is room for dialogue and that we're all learning from each other. Because the point is that we're creating spaces within our work environment where everybody can be their fullest selves, and everybody feels like if there is something wrong, there is space for me to address it, and that we're all on the same page. And to me, I personally hate the term social justice warriors, because I feel like social justice should be important to everyone. And I feel like it should not be something that we're just throwing around really casually, especially during such a turbulent time in our country, the only way for these initiatives to work is that all of us are prioritizing it. It's not an extra thing. It is deeply embedded into our ideas about how to make our workspaces more inclusive and more equitable.
Mm-hmm.
Very well said. I think there'd be open applause if everyone had their mics off right now. How about jazz hands for that one, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other thoughts from our panel on that?
I absolutely agree with that. When I read social justice warriors or even cancel culture, to be honest, I just like cringe. I just feel like there are these like buzzwords now, like especially like social justice warriors, like everyone should care about social justice. That's, why are we giving these like names and they're like nuances about these things? And cancel culture, I mean, to be honest, I believe in, having those uncomfortable conversations. But when you know better, that's the thing, when you know better, I want to hold you accountable for that. I don't want to cancel you, but I want to hold you accountable. I'm not going to make it uncomfortable at work for you, but I'm going to hold you accountable. And I think sometimes the people that are saying cancel culture, they're not used to being held accountable. And they need to get used to that. They need to get used to being uncomfortable in that space. And then do I believe that it's going to have a negative or positive impact? I don't feel like it affects D&I at all, whether negative or positively. I don't believe that. So those are my 2 cents.
I think it's also important that you get training or facilitators to come into your organization to handle this responsibly. I've experienced senior leaders taking the onus on, trying to do, something related to DE&I, and then it failed miserably. I've also seen internal HR professionals do something similar. Now, I will say, HR, personally, I don't think this should be something that HR facilitates. I think this should be a third party for reasons that we can get into in maybe another session. But bringing someone from the outside not only ensures that it's equitable, meaning that there's not going to be, you're not going to have to worry that this is something that you're forcing down your employees' throats, or they get the impression that it's being forced down their throats. And at the same time, you ensure that you have a professional who's experienced, who's trained, who's objective, right? Doesn't come in with the same kind of cultural biases that every organization has. Like every organization has a way they work. It takes a lot for organizations to admit when they don't know. And that is one of the most powerful things that you can do as a human being, right? So remember, I said earlier, this is less about, what you do at work and then you go home. This is so much about, doing an introspective look on like how you operate and saying, look, we're not really versed in this space. Let's bring Brittni in. Let's bring more in to have these conversations with our team. I was about to say with our students, but bring in the experts to have these conversations, right? We're all students, though. You're never not a student. We're always growing.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
100%. Very good.
Yeah, well done. Shall we
Right.
move on to the next one then, John?
Go ahead.
We may have alluded to some of this already, but how do we ensure we're hiring a diverse talent set while still having a fair and equal hiring practice?
I'll touch on this a little bit. I think for me and what I've learned with like this, we have to kind of change our mindset. I think that we have to kind of get over the assumption that if in order to get a diverse hiring pool, we're almost lowering our standards, which that's not the case. We should, anybody that we consider for the job should be qualified for the job. And let's get those qualified people from underrepresented groups. And if they're qualified and they're underrepresented, there's not any friction. But I think we just have this mindset that, oh, if we're trying to hire a diverse pool, we're lowering our standards. And we as a whole need to kind of change our mindset. So that's how I feel.
No, good point. Anything else?
Sorry.
No, we're waiting. Go on.
I had an experience when I was working with a tech company in Boston, and they were talking about how they wanted to incorporate more like high school students who may be interested in, environmental tech in general. And I said, well, where are you looking? And all the schools that they're looking at are like the elite high schools in the area. And I was like, okay, but you're not looking in the right places. I was like, you're trying to tell me that there's no Black or brown kids who are interested in climate or environment work. How do you know that? If you're not going to these places, then you don't know. So to me, it's like, to Brittni's point, it's not that we're lowering standards, it's that where are you advertising to get great employees? If you're going to the same places, then why are you surprised that the hiring looks the same? There's a lot of untapped potential that you are ignoring and wondering why your entire, office space is predominantly white.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
Absolutely
I think it
great
is.
point. You must
Yeah.
be a consultant in this area, Maura.
We also have to demystify where we think good talent comes from, right? Like, so Harvard and Yale and the Princetons of the world are not the only places where you have good talent. There are public schools. So for example, I used to work at Rutgers University. Now I think their prestige has kind of grown since they've joined the Big Ten, but it's a state school, right? And it's the school that New Jersey students are, it's the largest academic institution in the state. And again, I don't know the context in your particular areas, but just be mindful that it does not take an elite school to produce elite talent. A lot of these state schools have some of the same faculty that some of these larger institutions do as well. So, we're not even talking about, they're getting a subpar education. They're getting a similar, if not the same education across the board. It just has a different brand, right? And so just be mindful of like talent comes from different places. Also, when we think about age, right? So right now we're talking very specifically about race.
Mhm.
When we're thinking about age and tech, right? Oftentimes we run into these challenges where you're thinking you're only going to get a 19, 20-year-old to come in and solve problems. Well, that's not the case, right? You have people who are 55 plus, 45 plus, who maybe, I just met a woman yesterday who I forgot what she used to be, but she decided to become a nurse technician of some sort. So she did like the x-rays. And she did the career switch when she was in her late to like almost 50 years old. And now, she's 60. I thought that was an incredible story that talks about like, it's not that you run out of use, you shift, you change. So just be mindful of that too. Even when you're thinking about talent, like does talent need to always be a 22-year-old out of college, right? Can it be someone from a diverse kind of age group as well?
No, it's a really good point. Case in point, who will be 62 in May?
As useful as anyone I know.
Any other contributions to that? I think we covered quite a bit of territory. John,
Okay,
you want to take our next one?
I will, yeah. I was wondering if the panel could talk a bit about, maybe we can form a top 5 list of do's and don'ts of diversity, equity, inclusion, what's B? Belonging? Bravery? Belonging? Okay, yeah. In the workplace. So what are the top 5 do's and don'ts?
I would say your first response should not be to create a D&I committee. I'm seeing a lot of organizations who are acting very reactionary in light of, the current state of the United States. If you're going to create a committee, one, it needs to be thought out, right? Like what are the metrics? What are our goals? What do we want to accomplish? Who's on the D&I committee? Is upper management on the committee? Is middle management on the committee? Are the folks who are direct service providers on the committee? Because if you have not thought about it in depth, it's performative, and it's not going to solve the equity and inclusion concerns that your organization has.
Okay.
No, that's a really good point.
Okay, that's one of don't. Any other do's or don'ts?
I would say do ask for help. I mentioned that earlier. One, because a facilitator who specializes in this can help you kind of move the conversation forward in a way that's responsible and effective. But also part of DE&I training sets a standard and a shared understanding around the language, right? So oftentimes we come into these spaces and we assume that everyone knows what diversity, inclusion, and equity are. And, depending on the organization that you came from, depending on your own kind of internalized perceptions on the space, because it's not lost on me that everyone doesn't necessarily believe in it, right? Like, let's just be really honest. There have been people, I've worked in organizations who say, like, why should we even focus on this? If you're dealing with a team that's global, you're going to run into this a lot. And this is something that we ran into quite often, because it's like, well, why are we devoting so much time here to talk about diversity and inclusion? We're not even in the United States, right? So particularly if you're like in a more homogenous country. So, bringing someone from the outside to kind of help shape the narrative and to make sure that there's a shared understanding is really important. And, it's an investment. So I would say probably another do is like invest in this. You need to allocate resources. This can't just be a pet project that gets put on people of color within your organization. That often happens as well. It's like, well, instead of senior leaders handling this, we're going to have a mid-level manager who is Black, Hispanic, queer, what have you, do the work. So I probably said a couple of do's and don'ts, but those are all like very important.
And now when you talk about investment, Melissa, you referred to people's time. Is there other types of investment and stuff that should be considered?
Yeah, money, right? So
Totally.
That's one. And I really want to emphasize this too, right? If there is an important initiative at your place of employment, it is always going to be sponsored. You need an executive sponsor to kind of sign off. I mean, particularly in the ones I've been in, right? So whenever we wanted to kickstart a project, we needed an executive sponsor. That executive sponsor was going to be the one to sign off because their line of business was going to be responsible for, let's say, $100,000 behind this project, right? And so you need that. You need to not only demonstrate that this is important through the value of currency, but then it also incentivizes people to dedicate time to it. If your OKRs and your company goals are focused on, revenue generating activities or activities that hit your bottom line directly, sales, right? If those are my goals, what incentive do I have to try to solve D&I if there's like no money, there are no resources to put behind it, and it's all lip service? So like to Laura's point, it then starts to feel performative because now you're, just reliant on, one or two people who may be passionate about it, and you're robbing them of their energy. Another book that Mary Frances Winters wrote that I have not read, but I'm looking forward to it, that I think is relatively new, is Black Fatigue. And it talks a little bit about, how, particularly in this case, Black employees have just, they've felt drained. I know a lot of us have left the workspace, become entrepreneurs, decided not to return to corporate. And, this is in part why, right? There are obviously other things too, but yeah, so hopefully that's insightful for you guys to at least start to think about.
I don't have much to add. I think we covered. I know it wasn't 5, but these are very important parts. Like don't create it just to create it. I've seen that so many times and so many times recently. And it's just frustrating to see. It's like you're talking the talk, but you're not actually walking the walk. And it's disappointing, I can say, for me as a Black woman to be at a company where it's like you do this performative thing and then it just falls. And it's like, oh, it didn't mean much. And, again, speaking as a Black woman, the Black fatigue and being asked to be a part of these programs and not having the sponsorship, not having the money. Like, what are you supposed to do without money? Like, money makes the world go round. I'm sorry, but what are you supposed to do without the money? And you already feel so much weight on your shoulder, and then you're going into the workplace and you're just feeling like, I can barely get my job done that I'm getting paid for, and you're putting this other thing onto me, and I can't do it because it's not performative for me. It's something real. So if you're going to truly do this and invest. If you don't find it important, don't do it. Just don't do
Be
it.
prepared for what happens next, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Okay.
good point.
I think 7 points that any organization can learn from. So thank you so much for all that. You want to get the next one, Annie?
Sure. How about we have you seen examples of approaches to DEI in faith-based organizations?
I have actually. I'm not a part of these faith-based organizations, but I have seen it. My parents are in like this DE&I council at their church, because they're like, if you're a Christian, being diverse and inclusive is like super important to humankind, mankind. And so, they're like, as Christians, as a part of the church, they have to walk the walk and have the conversations all the time through everything. So I've seen approaches, they meet like twice a week and they have those difficult conversations. And I'm always impressed that they're, not just reading from the scripture, they're having really difficult conversations. And they are allowing people that have never been comfortable to ask those questions to ask those questions and to not know everything. And so, I've seen it work. And I'm glad that they're having it all over the place, not just in the workplace, but it should be happening everywhere.
Sure. So John, we've got not a ton of time. Do you want to try and tackle a couple more?
Yeah, we'll maybe work through a few. Let's have some speedy responses maybe. And one interesting thing to talk, the next question actually is, how do you think diversity, equity, and inclusion influences things like collaboration or use of technology or working remotely? Are there any specific challenges or benefits from good diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies?
Whoops.
Are the things not related? I don't know.
So I have a thought here. So when we're talking about how we think D&I influences the use of technology, so I go back to this idea of when you think about diversity, it's not just race. That's number one. Unfortunately, that is like the predominant kind of thing that we consider because of the nature of the social justice events in the past year or two. I think about it in terms of, I go to ableism, ageism, right? And this idea of Miro is an excellent tool, right? But I also have to be very mindful that, if I'm doing a workshop with a group of people who may not necessarily be as digitally savvy, right? I have to make sure that I expand those pro tips that like Annie put at the beginning, right? Sometimes what I'll do is I'll put resource or send resources in advance to say, hey, watch this video. before you get started. If you have questions, let me know. And then, you have to be patient too, because again, this is a world that I don't think any of us a year ago thought we would live. I don't think any of us thought we would be doing these types of things from our bedrooms. So let's just say that I think, I personally extend so much grace to people when I think about people with children, for example, as well. If you have children, you may not necessarily be able to have a 3-hour meeting or a 3-hour workshop, for example. You may need to break that up. You may need to have your daughter or son or child on your lap. And just be mindful of, just because I have a child in tow. I remember specifically, I was kind of half babysitting my niece, and during a session I was facilitating, she decided that she needed all the attention. And I almost wanted to cry, because I was just like, I need someone to get her, but then I also need to talk to people here. And actually, it was on D&I, ironically. And I remember everyone on the call was just like, go get her, it's fine, because she was like hollering and cursing me out in the back. So, that's an example of just making sure that you set a culture of inclusion, to say, we recognize everyone is working from home. We recognize that, you may have challenges either getting on, you may have family challenges, you may be a caretaker, right? And so just be mindful of that when you're thinking about the sessions that you are doing collaboratively with tools like Miro or other kind of collaborative tools.
I think
Good
points.
the way that we work now is so different. And I feel like when we're talking about the influence of D&I, I think that if we're, to Melissa's point, we're talking about, things like ableism, things like access, things like, I think that what we're being exposed to now is the humanness of people, and that we need to be extending more grace in terms of we don't really talk enough about the assumption that everybody has high-speed internet, everybody has computers to work from home, or what people's living situations are, and also the fact that we're going through a global health crisis, and there are folks that we know who have contracted COVID-19 or are scared of contracting COVID-19. And so I think that D&I work, especially in reference to Miro, is that it allows us to work in more of a community. And I think that that's really what we need in general. I think that we need to be more focused on community work.
Very good.
Now, we may have people that may have to leave. Do we want to briefly just look for the feedback piece, and then we could carry on the conversation for a little bit longer, John?
I'm fine with that. And so let's just scroll down on our Miro board just to show folks quickly. You might have to sign off right at the hour that we have a retrospective set up. I'll just pull everybody on the board to me. Surprise. So yeah, if you have anything you feel went really well about this event, or things we could do better, or ideas for future events, be sure to let us know. And also, don't forget that we have a couple of links at the very bottom. Sorry if people were still following me or dragged all over the place now. There are a couple of key links we always like to share with folks. One's the Miro community at community.miro.com. This thing has just exploded over the past 8-9 months. So we're almost at 15,000 members in the community now. And I was one of the first members of that community. So it's amazing to see it grow. The second is likely how you found this event, events.miro.com. You can check out there all the amazing events that are coming up. There's so many new user groups popping up in DC and LA, New York City, and Texas, San Francisco, San Diego. Those are some of the US based ones. There's also Latin America. There's one in the APAC in the Asia region and Europe as well. So there's events for everybody in every time zone, especially for Jacqueline in Kuala Lumpur, and Alexandra, I think she said she was in somewhere overseas in Europe. I don't exactly remember, but I know it's got to be super late. So there are European user group events that you can get there too that might align a little better with your calendar, but I understand you likely came because of the importance of this conversation. And the last link here to check out in Sweden, thank you, Alexandra. So the last thing to check out is the Miroverse. And if you don't know, if you're not a big Miro user, there's a grouping of templates, user-driven content in something called the Miroverse. So you click the link here, miro.com/Miroverse, and do a search for something you're wanting to create, some kind of way to capture feedback or manage a project. You can do a search there and find some of the most amazing user-driven content out there. I go through that about once a week. Every month there's new updates. They announce a whole bunch of new templates, and soon there's going to be a template for absolutely everything, including some stuff that I hope Annie gets in there very soon for as well. So check out the Miroverse at your earliest convenience. And so anyone who does have to go, thank you so much for your attendance, your attention, and your comments. If you were one of the people who asked questions, as we wind down this event, same to you, Jacqueline, keep safe. As we wind down this event, we can have people pop off mics and come in to ask a few more questions when we get through these last few. So thank you again for coming, and we'll get back into asking and answering these final questions. So here we go. Annie, do you want to grab the next one?
Yeah, sure. So the next one is, how do you encourage people to ask uncomfortable questions?
I think it's again creating that safe space. Like you have to create that safe space for people to even feel comfortable asking those questions. I think, we did a good job of that here. We aren't claiming to know every single thing. We're inviting you to ask those questions. We're inviting you to make, mistakes. I think I've had, a conversation with you, John. It's like, hey, it's okay to ask those questions. You don't have to tiptoe. And I think we've created that safe space with each other where he could come to me and say, like, I don't know. Like, I want to learn. If someone's coming to me and saying, I don't know, I want to learn, hey, I'm all about it. Even, you can't say anything wrong. You already said everything right by, I'm open. I want to know. I want to learn.
And on the flip side of that, Brittni's always made me feel very welcome to have these kinds of conversations. I don't shy away from it. I try and ask in a respectful way, and I always kind of fall back with, I just don't know. And she's always so gracious with her time and her attention to telling me it's okay and that it's good to have these conversations. And I've always appreciated that, always.
Mhm.
I'd say use these types of events at your disposal, right? Because while myself and Brittni and more are like, advocates here and want to help facilitate these conversations, don't make the assumption that every person of color at your workplace will want to do the same work. Likely they won't. They want to go home and have dinner with their kids just like you. And so there are plenty of events like, again, this one here in Miro. I see even on the retro board, this conversation about like, great, would love to kind of break this topic down and talk about a lot more things. Join the conversation on podcasts. The reason why I'm such a big advocate of podcasts is because I truly believe that the power behind them, the power of storytelling is like really baked into them. The best way to kind of learn about a new thing or a person is through their story and their conversation, period. And if you look at podcasts like Code Switching, of course, now that I'm talking about it, I'm going to forget all the good ones. There's one, I see their cover, but I'll definitely send you guys like a couple and put them on the Miro board, right?
Yeah,
Like there are podcasts, there are books, whatever your medium of choice is, right? If you like live events like this, they exist. You can go, on like Eventbrite and search for them. So it's at your fingertips and don't be afraid to use it.
I know on the YouTube channel I recently found, and it's called, it's a race-based thing, but it's called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And
that's a new one. Yep.
It's unbelievably good and has like some great conversations, gets people to open up, ask those questions they've always been too afraid. And it's so insightful in the responses. I just love watching that channel.
Mm-hmm.
I would also chime in if you are not familiar with Kimberly Crenshaw's work. She has a YouTube series that she started at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, I believe it's called Under the Blacklight. And she has different topics every single week about like intersectionality, Black Lives Matter, things of that nature. But if your medium is more like YouTube, she has not only the YouTube series, but also her own podcast on intersectionality, if that's not something you're familiar with. Mary Pender Green is someone I also really love. She does a lot of webinars and trainings around DEI work, and they're always really insightful conversations. She also has a lot of free events as well. So I feel like if you can tap into either of them, I love Kimberly Crenshaw. I cannot say enough about her, but definitely tap into either of them. They both have such a wealth of knowledge.
Awesome.
Excellent. Cool. So we've got another question here. Are solutions like affirmative action or other government legislated initiatives that could legally require more proportional representation in businesses viable solutions to increase diversity in the workplace?
I have feelings on this. So I feel like affirmative action has got a bad rap because people don't actually know what it is, the legislation, and companies have implemented it incorrectly. A lot of companies have said like, okay, affirmative action, we need to fill these quotas. And legally, if you look at the legislation, it's not about like filling quotas. That's illegal. So I feel like these programs like affirmative action, they're a necessity right now because there's still a lot of companies, a lot of schools, a lot of everything that are doing horribly, doing just horribly at, having having underrepresented groups even show up at their companies, at their schools. And until we fix that problem, yes, we do need legislation like this behind us. So I really just think affirmative action has been marketed wrong. People don't actually know what it is. So, yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, the intention behind it was to address equity issues, and now it's just really been a diversity tool to just make sure we have our numbers. So it focuses on that quantitative metric, doesn't focus anything on inclusion. It doesn't talk anything about quality, right? Like it just says, oh, we've got 3 Black people, great. And like that wasn't the intention. And so I agree 1,000%. So perhaps we need a rebranding effort there.
Yeah, fair enough. And we've got, I think, a couple more here. So our DEIB group struggles with engaging employees for optional listening sessions and education, in brackets reading. So how might we increase employee engagement in this type of conversation without retreating to a required training?
Personally, I do think that the trainings need to be mandatory. I just feel like when I think about my organization implementing this work, we can't act like everyone is jazzed to talk about equity and inclusion or anti-racism. Everyone is not. Everyone is not, as passionate, and that's okay. But at this critical time, particularly in the United States, it really cannot be optional because it's impacting the lives of your colleagues. And to me, it's about people. So if you're saying that you value the company, you value people, you value your colleagues, then this work should not be optional because it is going to create a space where your colleagues can be their fullest selves. And to me, that should be important to everyone. So I think that making things optional, to me, creates a space where it's like, well, it's kind of important, but I don't really have time for it. It doesn't really fit in my schedule. I'm not, and that's not, we can't talk about things like anti-racism in that way anymore. We really can't afford to.
Good point.
I'm gonna put something else into the atmosphere too. Don't make it a separate session. Bake it into what you're already doing. So what we did at Samsung was look at inclusive product development because we're a product team. So it's kind of like making it applicable and palpable to the audience in which you're working with. So for example, we have bi-weekly research review sessions. It needs to be a conversation there. We have bi-weekly design reviews. We need to have that conversation there. When you start to separate the conversation of DEI into its own kind of like, hey guys, like let's sit here and talk about something that's really uncomfortable that nobody wants to partake in, even, people of color or people of marginalized groups, it's not going to be effective. When you start making it applicable and humanizing it and saying, okay, we've got this product. We know from the research that our product doesn't reach these types of markets or these types of people. What are we doing about it? Why? Why do we think that's it's even happening? Sometimes it's not even as complicated as trying to find the solve, right? Particularly in corporate spaces. We get into the solutioning stage very prematurely. It's like, I think Maura brought up, like, don't start a committee, right? Please don't start a committee. It's like, let's have this conversation. Why at the top, right? Or like even at the bottom, but let's just start to have these conversations. Why do we think it's important? And then, perhaps have someone in the room, particularly the leader, or the hippo, we call it, the highest paid person in the room, to just make sure that it is constantly being, it's top of mind.
You have to bake it into everything that you do. I feel that. And I feel like that's what we do. The people in this panel, it's baked in to everything that we do. We don't separate it. But I, also agree, like if you're having these listening sessions and readings, like you can't make it optional, because it just gives people a pass to like, okay, it's,
Doesn't affect
it's
me.
it's that team building activity that I just don't want to do. But it's so much bigger than this. And, it is unfortunate when you are, that underrepresented group and you're in these sessions and you're like, no one else. And when you don't even see like the leader of the company in the session, it's like, well, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So it has to be important. It has to be baked into everything that you're doing, because it is baked into everything that you're doing as people. It should be.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay. So last one we've got for right now are what are some objective and key result examples for DE&I? What are some OKRs that we could put into place that would measure it or keep us on track, give us something to shoot for?
So I'm going to jump back into the particular product space, and please apply it to whatever industry you're in, right? I think we didn't get this far in terms of setting the OKR, but it would be something that's in part quantitative and qualitative, right? So saying that we want to delight the user by ensuring that we have, cross-functional, that we've cross-pollinated our product across the United States, or that we have a diverse set of X amount of users across the United States and we delight the user, right? Again, it's about baking it into the natural cadence of like what you're doing, because now if I said something like, if I isolate the D&I objective, now it just becomes something that becomes othered, right? It's like, okay, well, at the end of the day, the bottom line has to matter first. And it does, right? And DE&I is not saying that you don't pay attention to the bottom line. I remember a product owner saying something like, well, why is this important? And, that was a case where you have to send them the Harvard Business Reviews, right? Like, they're just going to be some people who are sticklers. Like, it just is what it is. But to help to help circumvent that, it's this idea of bake it into what you're already doing. And if you don't know how, this is a good time to, again, get that third party from the outside to come in and examine what you're already doing and give you some perspective.
Mhm. Cool. And I think last but not least, we have one more question. The international company is having the issue of thinking DE&I for different regions. Example, India and Japan. How should we think about it?
I think when thinking internationally, it's important that if you are going to bring in a third party, to understand what the racial dynamics are that exist and the racial history that exists within that region. Because, racism doesn't look the same in the United States as it does in India, or, in the UK, or in Africa. Like, these are very complex. So to me, you want to get someone who knows their stuff, right? And understands that everything is not everything is not applicable to every region of the world. And you want to make sure that you're addressing what is needed for your specific region and assessing the organizations from that lens.
Even taking out the racial dynamics, that's just learning the history of the region on a whole. Like, when we're talking about accessibility, like how does that region even think about accessibility? Because we don't necessarily think about it the same way, in America as we do internationally. When we're thinking about being inclusive and equitable, like we were talking about, just like internet access and access to just anything, like let's really do the research, and it can't be a blanketed across the the thing. We're speaking more from the Americas, but I couldn't jump over to Japan and have this same conversation and have this same knowledge, and I would be the one sitting back and doing a lot of the listening and learning. So
Good point.
We had this conundrum. So we had employees that were based in Tel Aviv. And so some of the kickback was like, well, that's not necessarily something, the D&I strategies here in the States aren't going to apply gracefully in Tel Aviv. But one thing that I did learn, and so one, it's definitely, it's about learning the context of the area in which you're about to work. This idea of elevating women's voices was going to be something that we needed to focus on in Tel Aviv, right? And it's not to say that we didn't have any other kind of like racial or any other colors type of things that we needed to focus on, but it was just, okay, in this context, we need to think about gender a little bit more heavily. Here, we need to think about it racially. In another continent or another country, we're going to need to think about access, right, and what that means. So DE&I is not a conversation about metrics. I really want to get people out of this idea of it being like this quantitative, do we have enough, people who look like a certain way? It also includes diversity of thought. When we talked a little bit about those pipelines from different colleges, right? So are we only getting people from Harvard, right? And do we understand the nuances as to like why this person was set up for success? I just had this conversation the other day about Mark Zuckerberg, and people are like, oh my God, he's such a wealthy, prolific person. I'm just like, but he was set up for success. Like, he literally built a platform for Harvard. And I remember you couldn't get on it back in like 2003 or 4. It was only for the elite schools. It's now obviously what it is, and it has a plethora of problems because like its inception is rooted in something that that never kind of considered a global population. Again, we can talk about that for hours, but
Totally.
Context is everything. And these aren't just strictly numerical conversations. These are like story learn about the people that you're working with. Particularly if you're working in a global space, which a lot of us are, get to know like the context and the history. And that was something that, I had to, because I had no context. I'm like, I don't know anything about what's happening here, but through conversation, I was able to learn a lot more.
It's funny the way you describe that, Melissa, because I was thinking, it does seem like Facebook was created to appeal only to a certain crowd of privileged individuals, as opposed to a company, and this is another bigger company, and maybe this is not the best example, but Starbucks, at least, when they became popular, it was because of the lingo that they used, which made the people that went there feel included for being in that group, to use the terms vente and grande and know what that meant. So they weren't isolating specific groups and only letting those people in, but they did make the people who went there feel like they were part of an inclusive group. And I think that's an important distinction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, it's not impressive when, an Elon Musk or a Mark Zuckerberg is a billionaire. And now we're talking about socialist stuff that I'm not going to get into, but
part two.
But it's just like, that to me isn't impressive. You were literally like, so, and that goes into the equity conversation. Like, you were literally put in a place where if you weren't successful and, God forbid, you were on the unemployment line, then I would be like, well, how the hell did that happen? Right. So we need to just consider like why certain people are successful and they may look and fit a certain profile, and then other people, aren't, right? Like, those are the conversations you need to kind of dig into a lot more. So
Yep.
Very good. Okay. Well, 20 minutes over, but amazing conversation. So I'm so thankful and appreciative for the knowledge that was shared today. This is some really great stuff. There's some not overly complex things to consider here as well. I mean, this is a very complicated subject, but don't just form committees. Don't just jump out and put someone on it just because they're a person of color. Think things through. Take the opportunity to learn from third parties and have them guide. I think these are, some really great guidance for people to bring back to their workplaces and hopefully move things along, make things more diverse and inclusive along the way. Fantastic discussion. I'm just going to ramble if I talk anymore. So Maura, Brittni, and Melissa, thank you so much. I hope we can do this again soon and talk about really interesting topics. You're all amazing and very knowledgeable ladies. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
oh,
Thank you.
Okay. And wherever you're at in the world, go enjoy the rest of your evening. I think we're mostly North America now, if I'm looking around. I think so. Thanks so much for coming, everybody. And we will see you in a month at the next one.